I'm Rebecca from the blog and YouTube channel Moon and Magnolia, and today I want to share with you how to ferment bell peppers and fresh onions. Also called lacto fermentation, this process is a simple combination of water and salt to, of course, create a brine, and it is then poured over fresh vegetables. It is one of my favorite methods of food preservation because you don't have to do it in big batches and it only takes a couple minutes. So it is perfect if you are new to food preservation, if you don't have a lot of space, or if you don't have a lot of time. To ferment vegetables, you really don't need that much. You'll need a couple jars, a lid. I like to use these mason top weights. These hold the vegetables underneath the brine, and I like to use these little pickle pipes too. So this has a one-way valve that lets the air out but does not let any in. There are links for these supplies in the description box below, but if you don't have them, it is okay. There are a few workarounds that I will show you later in this video. I like to make the brine first, so that way the salt can dissolve in the water while I chop the vegetables. For the salt to water ratio, I mix together 1 tablespoon of salt per 2 cups of water. I use a canning and pickling salt because it does not have any anti-caking agents in it. Those anti-caking ingredients sometimes can make your water or your brine cloudy, so this will prevent that. But you could use kosher salt, for example, if that's what you have. Now I am going to make 4 cups of brine, so I'm going to put in 2 tablespoons of salt. So now I'm simply just going to whisk this together and then set it aside while I chop the vegetables. I will say that the salt to water ratio is a little more complicated than just 1 tablespoon per 2 cups of water. And that is because it's actually determined by weight. But I have found that for these vegetables and for my taste, 1 tablespoon per 2 cups of water is about right. But I will leave some links in the description box below for you so you can learn more about how to calculate the ratio based upon weight. So let's start with the green peppers. Make sure your vegetables are always washed clean. Everything in your kitchen is clean. Anytime we're preserving food, we just want the cleanest environment that we can have. And what I like to do when I am fermenting vegetables is I like to just chop, of course, one at a time and pack one at a time so I know that I'm not chopping up too much or if I need a little bit more, so that way I can kind of keep track of things. It's not always quite as simple as just like 1 pepper per jar, so that way I'm able to know if I need to chop up a little bit more or if I need to use a smaller jar, for example. So while I'm chopping these, I'll just share with you a little bit of information. So it is early 2024 while I am filming this, and it is not yet garden season. So these are store-bought peppers, and you can definitely ferment or preserve store-bought food. But what I like to do is I like to experiment with my food preservation earlier in the season, so that way when it comes time to ferment or to preserve the food that comes right out of my garden, I am not making mistakes. So I know what works, I know what I like and what I don't like, because I don't want to spend a lot of time preserving things if I don't actually like them or if I don't know what I'm doing, because I don't want a big fail. And I will say, one of my all-time favorite things to eat is a grilled cheese with lacto fermented bell peppers or a quesadilla. It is so good. So we want to fill the jar as much as we can within reason, of course. So I need to chop a few more peppers. Our brine is ready to go. Everything looks dissolved. So then all we do is pour the brine over the vegetables. I like to use a funnel to prevent mess, so stick the funnel right on top and then pour your brine over. So once I get the brine in there, I do like to take like a handleable wooden spoon or something like this and pack it down a little bit to make sure that there aren't any big air bubbles in the bottom. And then we might even find that once we do that a couple times, there is more room for a few more peppers. And I'm making a huge mess, so my theory about using a funnel to prevent a mess, I guess it's wrong. So just for a reference point, a jar this size takes about 2 cups of brine. Of course, it depends on what you're filling it with, but it is at least a good starting point. Now it's important to keep a weight on top of your vegetables. You want to hold them underneath of the brine because exposure to air is what can lead to mold. And of course we don't want mold in our fermented foods because if it is moldy, we have to pitch it. So just take your little weight, place it right on top. You can sometimes, you'll see there's a few stragglers that come to the top. Usually what I do is I take those out. If you don't have a weight, that is okay. There are a few ways to work around that. Really, you can use anything that will hold the vegetables underneath of the brine. In the past, I've used a little collapsible silicone funnel, which worked great. A popular trick is to use a folded cabbage leaf. You might have to do a little finagling to make sure it's the right size, but essentially, you just take the cabbage leaf and you put it inside the jar and you press it underneath of the brine. I like to kind of spread it around to make sure that it's filling up the width of the jar. And again, take out any little stragglers like this one. And that very easily can hold your vegetables underneath of the brine. Then all we need to do is take the pickle pipe, place it on top of the jar, take your ring and screw it on, and set this aside and let it ferment. Fermenting onions is the exact same process. So now that you know how to do the peppers, you know how to do the onions. So while I chop these up, I'll share with you a little bit more about lacto fermentation. If you have ever had sauerkraut, you have actually had lacto fermented food. Some people are often surprised to find out that sauerkraut is lacto fermentation. And lacto fermentation is popular and beneficial because it contains a lot of probiotics. I don't really like to get into the details too often of like what's good for you and what isn't because I'm not a nutritionist. But what I will do is I will leave a few links in the description box below so that way you can read up on lacto fermented vegetables, how they work, why they might be good for you, and a great method of food preservation. These are strawberry onions. So I got these at a local farmer's market. They are grown in strawberry fields as a companion plant to help balance the nutrition for the strawberries. They're really, really mild and delicious. So I'm really excited to preserve these. And that's another way or another reason why I like to use lacto fermentation, because I can go get small batches of local grown food and preserve it and keep it in my small pantry. So you don't have to feel like you have to grow every single thing that you preserve. You can get it from the store, you can get it from farmers markets or local farms, and then do small batches and have healthy preserved food for you and your family without having to have a huge garden or a homestead pantry, for example. So it appears that we don't have enough brine, but actually what we can do, if that's the case, is chop up some more vegetables because that will help push the brine up to the top. So a good solution if this happens is see if you can pack some more vegetables in your jar before you make more brine. It's hard to see the weight in here, but that totally works. So packing it with more onion and then pressing the weight down brought the brine to the top. So that worked like a charm. If you don't have a pickle pipe, you can simply take a regular canning lid and ring, place the lid on top and screw the ring on tightly. What's important to remember if you use a lid like this is you will need to burp this every single day. The fermentation process creates gas, so it's really important that you let the gas out. That's why I prefer the pickle pipes because I don't even have to think about it once I'm done. But if you don't have them and you want to use a lid, this will work fine, just don't forget to burp it. Now I will put these on the counter out of direct sunlight and at room temperature for about 2 weeks or so. How long it takes for your vegetables to lacto ferment really depends on a couple of factors, including the quality of your brine. So the easiest way to determine if your vegetables have finished fermenting is to use your senses. Look to see that everything is even in color and looks edible. Smell your fermented food, make sure it doesn't smell bad. It'll probably smell a little salty and even a little tangy, but it should smell like something edible. And of course, you can always taste your fermented vegetables along the way. Again, if you see mold, don't taste them, but a really quick way to decide is to open the jar, take a little taste, and see if it tastes good. It should taste tangy. It even has like a sort of carbonated kind of texture to it sometimes, and that is an easy way to tell if your vegetables are done. When they are finished, you can pop them in the fridge and they'll last about 4 to 6 months that way. This is a really simple way to preserve food in small batches. So if you have leftovers from store-bought vegetables, something coming out of your garden, or you find a really great deal at the farmer's market, you can preserve your food through lacto fermentation in just a matter of minutes.